Hi. So we are going to see a topic, which is going to be pivot tables and pivot charts that can help you when you have a survey. So if you remember, our problem situation is specifically about the markets, municipal markets and supermarkets and whatnot. Okay. So there was a survey done and you have the survey, but you also have all the answers, right? So you'll find the answers in the Excel. And so P1 is question 1, P2 question 2. But if you were having doubts about this question 2-1, 2, this is 2-1, 2-2, 2-3, 2-4, they have to do with this. Specifically, the question was, in which of the following options do you usually make your purchases? And it says mark all that apply. So basically the 0 is going to be no, I don't go to that specific store, that specific type of store, and 1, I do. So in the specific of 2-1, it's talking about municipal markets. So it would be, the question right there is, do you go to municipal markets? Yes or no? Okay. The second one, or the second option, was supermarkets type Walmart, H-E-B, Soriana, those type of stores. And the same thing. The third one is tianguis or rolling markets. The fourth one is going to be outlets. The fifth one is pharmacies, and so on and so forth until you get to 11, which is the other. Okay. This is just so that we understand how this is divided and why there are questions that says 2_1, 2_2, 2_3. Okay. It's different, for example, of question 3, which is, which of the following options you visit most frequently? So which one of these types, the municipal markets, the supermarkets, the tianguis, which ones do you go most often? Okay. And one of the things is, when we have a data set, it's not that easy for us to analyze. So one of the first things that we use to analyze is going to be pivot charts and pivot tables. Well, pivot tables first and then pivot charts. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to select all your data. So let's select all our data. That's all of our survey, all of our titles, and then I'll select all of our data. So we have 281 responses in this sample for this particular problem. And then we're going to go to the toolbar of insert, okay? And in the toolbar of insert, at the very left is something that's called pivot table. If you have it in Spanish, it's going to be called tablas dinámicas, okay? So here it is, pivot table. You have options, okay? You don't have to choose it from like the little arrow. You can just click on it and it will open up this pop-up window. And this pop-up window basically says, which is the range that you're going to be summarizing. Since we've selected it, it's already there. And I would always tell you, it's always easiest to put it in an existing sheet just so that you can add more to this, okay? And add this model, add this data to the data model. That is only if you have another of the tools set up. Don't worry about it. We won't need it for this particular exercise. So we'll go, okay. Okay. So this is our space. If you've never done a pivot table, this is a space where a pivot table will show up. Okay. This space right there. You can't actually do anything because it's just like the background to the Excel. But on your right-hand side, you're going to have this pivot table fields, and you have a search bar, which that means you can write, for example, one of our questions is going to be about age range. So you could put age and then you'll find that title. And all of these are the titles, if you remember, the titles of our survey, okay, or the answer sheet. So here they all are. And you might want to have the survey open so that you know what exactly P2_4 means, okay, so that you can look and say, oh, okay, those are outlets. Okay. So anything that I have here is you can select it and bring it down. It's kind of like a drag and drop. You grab it and you drop it wherever you want it, okay? see? Or you can select it, but select, it's going to always put it where it believes in rows, for example, or columns. So to me, it is easier, and this is a very individual thing, to just drag and drop where I want it. So if I drag a field here in filters, what it's going to do, it's going to essentially create a filter. If I do it here in columns, it will put it in columns. I'm going to go ahead and put age, and I'm going to use age so that you can see it. So we know that it's a range of ages. So if I put it in rows, you're going to see that all my ages are right there. If I put that, this is summarizing, okay? It's not, right now it's just giving me out of the 281 different rows that I have, which is the unique one in that particular age. If I put it in rows, it puts it right here in rows, okay? If I put it in values, when I put it in values, if it is an alphanumerical value, it's going to count. If it is a numerical value, it will always by default add. This in particular, since if you can see, it's an alphanumerical, it's going to count them. So at least right now, we know that there are 281 rows or 81 surveys. We have that, we already knew that, but basically that is how it is going to work. And what a pivot table does, it really does summarize all our information. You know, right now we only have 281, but if you had 10,000, 20,000, 100,000, it summarizes into a little table where it is much easier for us to analyze. So the question was, create a chart where we can see the age ranges based or compared to the type of store that they go to, okay? So it was question 3. So we knew that because it said question 3, and with different demographic things. One was the age. So let's play around. I've always said there's not really a wrong or a right way to do a pivot table. It really depends on what you want to see, how simplified you want to see it, and who's going to be reading it. To me, the simplest is always going to be the better. The more compact it is, it's going to be much easier for you or the person who you're sending it to analyze the information. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do it both ways so that you can also see that it's very simple. So we know we're going to be comparing age with the store. So the store, we know that it's in question 3. So what happens if I put question 3 there? So question 3 only had options. It only had one was specifically the municipal markets, 2 was supermarkets, and 4 was specifically outlets. So we have different, we don't have the exact name, we have the number, but that can be fixed, okay? So we have that, and what happens if I put the age? Where's the age? The age is right here. What happens if I get age and put it here in columns? So it becomes very wide. Do you see? It becomes very wide, mainly because of the titles, because what we're going to be doing is counting. But because of those titles, it becomes very, very, very wide. And we don't necessarily want it to be very, very wide because it becomes very, very complicated to read. So let's create it, and then we'll see an alternative to it. What we want is to be able to see how many of those surveyed from 16 to 20 years old go to the municipal market. How many of them go to the supermarket? How many go to convenience stores? So one, we have all this data, and we can actually count any of the fields we can count, but this one in particular has something called an ID, which should be a unique identifier. That means each person has their unique number, okay? So I'm going to put it right here. And since I'm going to go to the data so you can see it, since this is a number, okay, since this is a number, what it's going to do, it's going to add automatically. We don't want it to add automatically. So what we're going to do is just tell it to count. If we add it, that means our very last surveys, which are at the very bottom, will be worth a lot more than the very first one. We don't want that. It's not something that's truthful. And if you can see right here in the values box, it says sum of ID. We don't want the sum of ID. So we'll go ahead and click right at the arrow, normal click, go to value field settings. And there we're going to have this as a summarized value field by. What do I want it to be summarized by? Well, we want it to be done by the count. We want it to count. Okay. So now that we've counted it, we can actually see the information. But it's a little bit spread out. That to me tells me a lot, because since it's spread out, it becomes a little bit more complicated, because at least my head has to be going from side. So, like I said, there's no right way or wrong way to do it. This is correct. It really does depend on the person who's reading it. But what happens if I interchange, if I put age in rows? So I'm going to get the value of P20, which is age, bring it over here, and I'm going to get the p-value of 3 to columns. And it becomes very, very, very compact. If you can tell right here, it is very, very simple for me to see two things. One, to see that the majority of the people, because of this number, go to supermarkets. And one was municipal markets. So in first place, most people go to supermarkets. In second place is most people go to municipal markets. The least one is this one in particular. That is number 6, which is central supply or warehouses, central de abastos, if you're wanting to put it in Spanish, okay? If you notice, we don't have all the numbers. That means most of them don't go to outlets. We don't have a 5, so most of them don't go to pharmacies, because that's not where they do it the most. The question was, where do you usually make purchases? So maybe they'll say, I don't usually make purchases there. But this is very interesting. It's also very interesting, for example, because it is in a table format, that I can see that older people don't necessarily go out. You know, they try to stay at the same thing, municipal markets or supermarkets. And there one is also only 6 of them were actually surveyed. So we don't have a lot of information about them. Most of those who were surveyed were from 21 to 25. It makes sense, because if you remember, this was done by university students. So it does make sense that they would grab people that they know, okay? Is it a random sample? No, most likely this is not a random sample. This is a sample done based on people that they knew. Is it correct? Is it going to be the correct photograph? Probably not, because it was not a random sample. But using this data to be able to analyze what we were trying, the exploratory data, it will help. Now that I have this, the question was actually put a graph. Okay, so I can put a graph to this. There's 2 ways, and we'll explore both ways to do it. One is to create something that is called a pivot chart. So if my cursor is inside of my pivot table, I will see that I have a new toolbar up here. And this one in mine, it says pivot table analyze. In some versions of Excel, it will only say analyze. Don't worry, it's the same. If you see, it's a different color than all of my other menus. So I'll go ahead and click on that. And these are all the options that I have for pivot tables. And if you want, I can make a video later of everything that we can do with pivot tables. So we're going to explore 2 things here. One is how to make a pivot chart. So the pivot chart is here on the right-hand side. And the first thing is that we have a clustered graph. Okay, there's my clustered graph. Okay, is it easy to read? No, it is actually very complicated to read. Is it correct? Yes, you can use it. To me, it is a lot of information, and it is very, very, it's all clumped together. So maybe that's not the best option. But in class, we saw this other option was the stacked column. The stacked column, it makes it a little bit cleaner. It's going to help us a lot, because if you can see, I don't have so much information. One is it is very simple to see, again, how many or who was the age group that I mostly interviewed, in this case 20 to 25. I can see the column chart that is higher. The least one is older from 60, followed by 51 to 60. So I can see that variation. I can also see by colors that number 2 is actually the one that has the most. That means that most of the people that were surveyed go to supermarkets, followed by blue, which is this blue right here, which is the municipal markets. So if you can see, it's simpler for me to do it. Visually, it is very, very simple to be able to also read. Both ways are correct. I won't say that they're not. They are correct, just that one is easier to read than the other, okay? And if you don't want to do it with columns, you can always do it with the bar charts, okay? It's the same information, it's just the orientation of it, okay? Just make sure this one is in its older to youngest, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and keep the column chart. I like it. There it is, okay? Now, like I said, this is a dynamic chart, which means that I have these. These are specifically, if you can tell, they're filters. I can hide them or I can leave them. For example, if I just want to see a table with the municipal markets, this is the graph just for municipal markets, because I know that one is a municipal market. If I want to see just of supermarkets, this is just of supermarkets, okay? So this is a very simple or fairly simple way to do it. That will help you a lot to interpret the information, okay? Now with this, keep in mind that this is going to actually depend on our data, the one we have in the data set. If you wanted for your data set, for example, for that question 3, for this one, for example, to not equal 1 to equal municipal markets, you'd have to do it either by hand, either by writing it by hand, by formula, or some sort of thing that you could actually change that title and then come back over here, select it, go to pivot table, analyze on the menu, and then click refresh. So refresh, and instead of having these numbers, you'd have obviously, now it would say, for example, 10 would say clubs, 9 would say convenience stores. Or when you're having the explanation, you could have that legend outside, or we have this table. Now what we could do is just copy the table. Now I'm not going to copy the totals because I don't need them right now. Not for the graph that I want to make. I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'll just substitute it here. This is municipal markets. This is supermarkets. This is tianguis. 6, if I'm not mistaken, was warehouses. 7 is shopping centers. And then it was corner shop. And then it was convenience stores. And then it was clubs. So now I've put the titles. We can't do it right here because right there it actually has, this is a pivot table, okay? So we don't want to necessarily modify this table, okay? But I'll go ahead and select this. This is no longer a pivot table. This is a pivot chart. This is no longer a pivot table. This is a normal Excel. So I'll go to insert, to the menu of insert. I'll go to my column charts, and there's also my column charts here to be able to have this. Now, there's a difference here, and if you can see right here, it is actually putting all of my types of places where I could go and buy things, supplies, and each of the stacks are the age groups. And that's not very useful. You can see it is hardly anything I can see. So if I select the graph and I go to my menu chart, my menu options, I have something that's called the chart design. And that chart design will help me. And I can use this one that says switch rows to column. So switching rows to column will give me the exact same graph that I had previously. I want to just make it a little bit taller to be able to get it and to be able to see it more clearly. Okay. This is two different ways to do it. One is having the name up here, having the name down here. Sorry, this is going to obviously, it depends how much information those who are analyzing this data is going to have of what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 means. If they don't, well, let's try to make it a little bit clearer for them. To recap, and this is so important, just every time we do graphs, you need a title. Okay, you need a title, like age distribution based on places where you make purchases. You need to be able to tell the person what is each axis. This is basically, this axis helps me, or this is number of people in age groups distribution. But if the axes are not that clear, it is important that we do tell the user what they are. With this little plus sign, you can get it, and you can always put here are the axis titles, and then you can change it. This, for example, is number of people. Okay. This right here is age group. And the title, we'll change the title. Age distribution based on places they shop. Consumer shop, so we don't know. Okay. So that's two ways that you can make these charts. You could also do it individually. You could go and make one graph per thing. So you could make one graph. So this is one, and you could put, this could be age distribution based on municipal market shoppers. Okay. And you'd copy that into your work. Then the next thing, you could do click 2. 2, we know that it would be no longer municipal markets. It would be supermarkets. Okay, so there are several ways you can do it. It's going to be what you want to know and how easy it is for you to be able to get the information. Okay. If you have any doubts, please contact me. Bye.